Welcome to Slaying Excel Dragons video number 28. Hey, these are the videos that accompany the book, and we are still in Chapter 5, the epic Chapter 5, all about formula and functions. And guess what? This video, we're going to talk about the VLOOKUP function, one of the most common functions. And get this, we have 30 pages in the book. Few other functions could actually take up 30 pages in a book. All sorts of great topics. We'll talk about categories for VLOOKUP table, which are very important. We'll see how the VLOOKUP can replace the IF function. We'll see how to assign a sales category using VLOOKUP, assign a grade, complete an invoice, even do two-way lookup. All sorts of topics in this video. All right, let's go over to our workbook. We're in the excelisfun start, and of course you can download this by clicking on the link below the video. We're going to start on the sheet VLOOKUP 2. Hey, this is where we left off last video. We were talking about the if function. All right, here are some categories, and here are the commission rates. So yes, of course, the more you sell, the bigger your commission rate. Here are some sales, and we want to deliver one of 6 different commission rates. Now, in the last video, we saw how to do this with the if. And the if function, to create this formula most efficiently, you have to list your values from smallest to biggest in the first column here, and then your commission rates in the second column. What is not required for this if function and the VLOOKUP are to explicitly list the categories. Now, I explicitly list these here because when people learn how to do VLOOKUP and if, it gets a little bit confusing. But no problem. If you just list from the smallest number to the biggest number, and then make sure you keep your equal signs in the same position on each category. And we've already talked about that at least twice so far in this book. In this example, we say whatever the lower end value is, that's where the equal sign goes. And then on the upper bound to this category, no equal sign. So this category is read, the sales are greater than or equal to 0 but less than 2,000. For this category, sales are greater than or equal to 2,000 but less than 3,000. Now notice, no double counting here because 2,000 is not included in this category, but it is included here. Really, that is the hardest thing to learn about the if and the VLOOKUP, or creating these categories. But we've seen some good tools to help us remember. All right, we never really want to do this. 6 categories, 5 ifs. Anytime your table, and this is the actual table, not this. This is our categories for us to learn. Anytime your table is set up like this, forget it. You can use VLOOKUP. Now, one last point about categories. These categories are mutually exclusive. That means you're dating only one person, right? No. It means when you find a sales number, it can fit into only one category. And they are collectively exhaustive. That means for all the possible numbers we can get, there is a category here in the table. Now, we're never going to get anything less than 0 because you can't have less than 0 sales. And the last category is an open-end category. So anything above 7,000, no problem. We got that covered. All right. Once you got the table, that's the easy part. We're going to start off looking at VLOOKUP. But guess what? We're not even going to type a formula. We're going to go through step by step and do it by hand, just like we did in the old days. And if we do it by hand, and we understand the logic of how we do it by hand, then the VLOOKUP is a snap, because the VLOOKUP function works exactly the same. So here it is. We're in this cell, and we have to look at the sales number. So I'm looking here. I put this in my brain. I go over to the table, and I have to find the category here. Now, you could use the categories. Look, our number 5018 is between this 5,000 and 7,000, right? So we know this is the category. We go over. Here's the first column for our lookup table. Second column, we go over to the second column. We grab this 0.4. We come back here and we go 0.4. That process is exactly how the VLOOKUP works. Now, let me do that again for this one. Actually, I'm going to do it for this one right here. Now, I'm going to put this in my brain, 1,000. I go over, and I'm ignoring this from now on. We're never going to talk about this again. This is just for learning, because VLOOKUP and if doesn't use that. Okay, We take the 1,000, put it in our brain. We come racing down the first column, and the first column must be sorted ascending from the smallest to the bigger numbers. We come racing down, and the first number we bump into that's bigger, remember I have 1,000 in my memory. I hit 2,000, I jump back to this row. That is an analogy for how the process of VLOOKUP works. As soon as I bump into a bigger number, I stop in this row. Now, the second column always has the number I want to return. So I'm going to go over to the second column. I put now that number in my brain, and I deliver it to the cell. Let's go down here, 7,000. I put the 7,000 in my brain. I come racing down this column. I bump into the first number that's bigger. There is no number that is bigger. So I stop in the last category. I come down here, and I point 0.05. 3,000. I put it in my brain. Remember, we're doing it by hand. Put it in my brain. I come flying down the first column, sorted ascending. I bump into the first number that's bigger. I jump back to this row. I jump over to the second column. That's the place that has the number I need to return. I put it in my brain. I come down here, and I go 0.02. If you follow that, then you're already a master of the VLOOKUP function. Now I'm going to get rid of all this, delete, and let's see how the VLOOKUP works. Equals VL, and if you use this a lot, you just hit VL tab over and over. Now I use the VLOOKUP thousands and thousands of times. And after the 30th or 40th time, I'm not even thinking. I just type equals VL tab. All right, here's the number we put in our brain. The screen tip argument, it is called lookup value. So I click there, and that's a relative cell reference. Comma, now you need to tell the VLOOKUP where the table is. The table, and you can click this hot link to go to help like we've done a few times in this class so far and read all about the requirements for this table. But just be sure and sort it ascending. All right, so table array, we got to tell it where it is. First column, second column, it could be as big as you want, and we'll see bigger columns later, bigger tables later. Both columns, and I'm going to hit the F4 key to lock, because when we copy it down, we're locking it. And guess what? This lookup table is never going to change, so I'm just going to hit F4 and leave it locked in all directions. Comma. The next argument is the column number. This says which column has the number you want to put in your brain and throw back in the cell. 1, 2. You never look up at the B and C. You think of the actual green range of cells. This is the first. This is the second. So guess what? We have to tell VLOOKUP to bring the number back from the second column. We type in a 2. Comma. This fourth argument, approximate or exact. Now, we'll do an exact match later. That's when you're looking up like words or people's names. Approximate match is the process of racing through the first column. When you bump into the first value that's bigger, you jump back to the next row. That means we have gaps between the values. That's why it's called approximate. It's not looking up $5,018. It wants to find the right category. So that's why it's bumping into the first bigger value and jumping backwards. So we want to put approximate match. Now, in computers, true is 1 and false is 0. Still further, if you go look at help, approximate match, since it's the most common, we're always doing commission tables, tax tables, things like that, the default is true. So if you leave this argument out, it will automatically assume you want true. So we are going to follow that convention. I'm going to backspace. Notice the square brackets here on all arguments that are listed in screen tips. When you see square brackets, it means there is some default, and it will assume that default. But you got to read help and know. We know that it will be true or approximate match. So I'm closing parentheses. That's it. Do you see how beautiful that is? How simple that is compared to that if? Control Enter. Control Shift tilde to get rid of the formatting, and double click and send it down. Now let's verify. Well, we already did this, right? And it got it exactly right every single time. Absolutely amazing. Now I'm going to, with this range still selected, active cell right there, hit F2. Times this, because we need to calculate the commissions. When I repopulate this with Control Enter, not only will the formula go into all the cells, but I thought the formatting would be brought forward, but it wasn't. Anyway, I'm going to Control-Shift-4 to apply currency format. Absolutely amazing. I'm going to click in the last cell and verify. The green table is still locked. That's still looking in the right place. Absolutely amazing. Wow. So this formula calculates the same as this. Which one do you want to use? There you go, the VLOOKUP. All right, let's go look at another example. I'm going to VLOOKUP 1. In this example, same thing. We're going to have a table over here. Except for our goal, our boss phoned up and says, look, I need you to categorize these sales. Either subpar, OK, good, great, or exceptional. Here's the sales numbers. No problem. As long as we have our table, this is the lookup table, and the numbers are assorted from smallest to biggest, we can use VLOOKUP equals VL tab, lookup value. That's the value we put in our brain, comma, the table. Again, this is a table with only 2 columns. The first one is always the lookup column for VLOOKUP. Second, third, or whatever columns, those are the values, the columns you can return values from. F4 to lock it in all directions, comma, column index, 1, 2. Column 2 has the thing we want to bring back to the cell. We're doing approximate lookup, so we can leave this last argument off, close parentheses, Control-Enter. Double click and send it down. Absolutely amazing. Look at that. Let's go ahead and change one of these. I'm going to change it to 555. Should be good. I'm going to change this one to 800. So I'm just testing. Looks like it's working perfectly. I'm going to come back down to the last cell and hit F2. Beautiful. All right, let's go over to V3. We would like to see how to assign a grade. Now, in this table, there are 3 columns. But no problem. We'll just do our VLOOKUP and say not 1, not 2, but please give me the thing from the 3rd column. Again, it's exactly like the other ones. Look at this score, put it in our brain, go racing down the first column. When I bump into the first number that's bigger, jump back here, go over to 2, 3 column, and I want a C in this cell. All right, so let's do it with VLOOKUP equals VL tab, lookup value, comma, the table. It is 3 columns, and always hit F4. We're locking this. The table is always going to be locked, comma, column index, 1, 2. It's the 3rd column that has the thing I want to bring back to the cell. We're still doing approximate, so we can leave this argument off, close parentheses, Control-Enter. Double click and send it down. And we can check. We can even check right here. I'm going to try 0, 99, 111. 130, which is exactly right on, right? So because our categories are set up this way, the lower end always has the equal sign. That should give us a B, and it does. 155. A 180. Let's try 160. So that looks like it's working just fine. How to assign a grade, and this time we saw from the 3rd column. Let's go over to the sheet V4. Now, totally awesome use for the VLOOKUP, and the very common use. We have some data, a data table describing our products, the name, the description, the price, and the cost. And we have a little invoice template. Anytime we type a product ID here, we want to automatically have the name from this column show up here, the price from this column to show up here. We'll type in our units, and then we want our formula to automatically calculate the total. Now, this is an example of one line item from an invoice. When people build invoices in Excel like this, they do this, but then they have this 10 times listed on the invoice. But for our learning purposes, we have just one. So there's the product. All right, notice products in the first column. Now, this is an example where you have an exact match. There's never going to be a product ID between any others. In that case, our table, our first column, does not have to be sorted. It just has to, if it can't find product dash 650 here, it'll return an NA, which means not available. But no problem. Let's go ahead and try this. Equals VLOOKUP, VL tab. Our lookup value is going to be this. Now, I am going to copy this formula over to here. And so I want this locked when I go this way. So I'm going to hit F4 1, 2, 3 times. $sign in front of the column reference. So when we copy this way, it's locked. That's our lookup value, comma, table array. Well, look at this. It's a big large table. Very common. VLOOKUPs are 2 columns just some of the time. Most of the time, the tax tables, the customer data tables, products tables have lots of columns. So I'm going to highlight the whole thing and hit F4. The only thing you want to remember about this table array is that the lookup value when you're using VLOOKUP has to be in the first column. Now, later when we talk about index and match, we'll see a lookup solution when the lookup value is not in the first column. But most tables, they are in the first column. All right, so there's our table array, comma. Now, column index. Well, we have to think about this name, 1, 2. So for this cell, it's 2. So I'm just going to type in a 2. When we copy it over, we're going to have to change that, comma. And our lookup range. Well, this is an exact match or false. I'm never going to type false. I'm always going to type 0. 0 always works. 0 represents false. Close parentheses, and that's it. Control Enter, and then drag it over. What? Price is bellin'. Oh, yeah, right. We need to put this into edit mode. 1, 2, 3. Oh, price is in the 4th column, so I need to change this to a 4. I'm going to Control Shift 4. Now we can do our formula right here for total equals units times price. $50. Now let's try this. I'm going to type PRO-711. That's this one right here. And look at that. Is that totally cool? This updates. It looks this up every time. Races here. It got the sunset. It got the 23. And our calculating formula went ahead and calculated 46. If I change this to 5, boom. Absolutely amazing. Now, what if we type in a product here that doesn't exist? We get NAs. Now, there's a few ways you could deal with this. I kind of like to leave it NA just to give us a visual cue that, hey, we're putting a product ID in that cell that doesn't exist. Now, I'm going to Control Z. Now, what if you don't know or don't have memorized the product ID? No problem. There's something called data validation. And in particular, data validation list that we're going to use. And it will add a drop-down. So we could just select a drop-down, select the product, and the drop-down will automatically look in the first column of our lookup table. All right, so I'm going to go to data validation with this cell selected, data, data validation, and data validation. Now, I remember the keyboard shortcut from earlier versions, and it's Alt-DL. Whatever. Just remember, you're doing data validation, so data ribbon, and then it's in the data tools under validations. Totally awesome. One of the cooler things in Excel. What do you want to allow? Now, there's a lot of cool things here. You could say allow only a whole number. Oh, and then you could type in a min and a max. You could type in a decimal, a date. So you could limit what type of dates people put into a cell with a start and an end, time, text length, all sorts of things. The one we want, and amongst the cooler ones in this list, is the list. And then look at that. It says, where's the source? So I'm going to click here and simply click and drag. From now on, you are not allowed to put anything in that cell except if it comes from this list. Now, there is one problem with this. If you copy and paste something to the cell, as we've seen before, when you copy, it copies everything. So when you paste it, it pastes over the data validation. And in that case, you could get something in the cell that wouldn't be allowed. But if you're just using the drop-down, forget it. Or typing, forget it. It's not going to let you put it in there unless it comes from that list. Now, let's come over here. Even cooler, we can put an error message. whatever, you could type in anything you want here. Please select from Dropdown. Obviously, I can't type. And there's different levels here. Warning, information. I'm going to put stop. That means you actually can't put it in. All right, and then I'm going to click OK. Now watch this. We can see. Oh, that is beautiful. Product 650. Now this arrow kind of hangs over the edge, which is probably not so bad. But we can always cheat a little bit. Go to the home ribbon. And how about indent? There actually is a keyboard shortcut for that, but it's Control-Alt-Tab. I never remember that. But now we can simply go. And our invoice, just amazing. Now, we're going to take this one step further. Right here in this formula, we had to type a 2. And then over here, we had to type a 4. Right? There is a way to automatically do that. But first, let's think about what a lookup function does. There's a bunch of lookup functions in Excel. We're going to look at VLOOKUP, match, index, and maybe one other one also. But VLOOKUP, what does it do? It actually looks up a value and returns something to the cell. So VLOOKUP returns something to the cell. If there was a way to have a lookup function that could look up, because name is right there, price is right there. If there was a way to have a lookup function that could look up the word name in this range right here and tell us 1, 2, that name is the second item in this list of values, that would be perfect for our situation. Here, we'd say, hey, if there was a lookup function, we'd say, hey, please look up price and look through here and tell me what is the relative position of the item in the list, or the ordinal position. So price is the word we're looking up. 1, 2, 3, 4. If there was a function that could do that, it'd be so cool, because then it could just say, hey, price is the 4th item. And would that work perfect for us? Because for VLOOKUP, if you have more than 2 columns like this, right, it needs a 2, a 3, a 4, or a 5. All right, let's see what this is. We're going to come down here. And I'm going to change the zoom down to maybe 185. I think that'll be just right. I'm scrolling down just a little bit. Now what I've done here is the same thing we had up above, except for look, I put the relative or ordinal position of the items in the list. And here it is. Let's see how to do this. Equals, and it's not VLOOKUP, it's called match. Match function does exactly what we want. It'll look up an item. And notice lookup value is the same name as VLOOKUP. It's going to look up that, comma, the lookup array, this right here. And guess what? What's so cool about match is you can have the range of values horizontal or vertical. Now, I need to lock this. And again, this is that situation where lookup array, it's just always going to be locked. So I'm just going to hit F4 and keep everything locked. Comma, and match is, I remember, the 1 and the 0 from VLOOKUP, approximate match, exact match. Those are the same. This one is, whereas up here we bump into the first bigger value, and the table has to be sorted ascending. This one bumps into the first smallest value and jumps back one, and the table has to be sorted descending. All right, I don't think we're going to see an example of that one in this book. All of that is up in help also. All right, 0 for exact match. Close parentheses, Control Enter, and I'm going to drag this over. Oh, that is so cool. The perfect solution. It's as if they thought we would want to use the match function inside the VLOOKUP. All right, so let's come over here, equals VLOOKUP. I'm going to look up that right there and lock the column reference, comma, the table, this big, huge table here, F4, comma, and the column index, I'm going to click right there, comma, and approximate or exact, we're doing exact. Because this first column right here, remember that we're doing the VLOOKUP, it's looking up that, so 0. Close parentheses. Control Enter. And drag it over. Now, when I already had this indented, so when I dragged it over, it brought the formatting. So I'm immediately going to point to this and say fill without formatting. All right, now I want to check this. Let's go ahead and click the drop down. Ooh, looks like that's looking at the wrong range. I'm going to Alt-DL. I'm going to come over here to Settings, and it's looking on SR. I have the wrong, completely wrong range there, so I'm going to delete this. Ooh, look at that. I'm going to delete. And now I'm going to go back to this. Wow, it's looking way. I'm scrolling, scrolling, scrolling. Actually, here I can type A1 and then click OK. And then I'm immediately going to Alt-DL and edit that. What I did there is I typed A1 without any sheet reference, and it just thought that it was A1 on the sheet where the data validation was, and then hit Enter. Now I open it back up, and I want to select these right here. Actually, why don't I select these? These are the proper ones that it's looking at. Click OK. Now I can go ahead and select, oh, that is so cool, Bellin 25. Product 901. And the advantage here is we didn't have to type in a 2 and a 4 and copy it over. Now for invoices or retrieving customer data, which we'll do an example in a couple minutes, this is really convenient because then you don't have to edit 5 to 10 formulas. Now we're going to take this one step further. I don't want to have separate cells down here, so I'm actually going to scoop this out, copy it in edit mode, Control-C, escape, click right here and F2. I'm going to double click that B5 and Control-V for pasting. Ah, look at that. Again, we're nesting functions. Match, perfect function for the column index number inside of VLOOKUP. Control-Enter. And now I'm going to copy this over, point to the Smart tag, and say Fill Without Formatting. All right, now you can delete this or clear it. Home, clear all, or Alt-EAA. And there you have an absolutely beautiful formula that you could use. Notice we only have one line, but you could have multiple lines on your invoice and multiple columns from data you're retrieving. All right, now, so in this example, we were looking up items from a lookup table with multiple columns, and we use data validation. Our next example, we're going to go over to sheet V5. And here, we're going to take this even one step further. Here is our template that we have, and we're looking up employees. So let's go over here to the C table sheet, or account numbers, right? And then here's the first name, last name, balance, and email. So this is not employees. This is a customer database. And I would like to use this list, or this lookup table, and this column of values here for data validation and VLOOKUP. But notice we're on this sheet here, and we want to use that data from that sheet on this sheet. Well, data validation won't work. You can't add data validation and click on a different sheet. But you can if you use defined names. A couple videos ago, we saw how to use defined names. We're going to do that here. So I'm going to click there and Control-Shift down arrow. I'm immediately going to come up to the name box, and this is going to be account DV. Now I'm naming this something that makes sense. If I scroll up, this is the account number, and I'm going to use it for data validation. So that's why I chose that particular name there. In addition, when you're using names, you cannot have spaces, and there's a few other characters you cannot use. So I'm going to make sure that I don't have any spaces. It's not letting me click up there now. All right, and then I'm going to hit Enter. All right, so now if I click here, and then try this data validation, sure enough, it looks like it got the right range. Now, I'm also going to use this table for VLOOKUP. So I'm going to highlight not the field names right there, but just the table for VLOOKUP. I'm going to highlight that and then Control-Shift down arrow. And I'm going to do, up in the name box, customer data. And then V for VLOOKUP, Enter. And I'm also going to use this right here. This range I'm going to call field, and then I'm going to do M for match, and then enter. That's not in the book. I don't think I did that way in the book, but no problem. We can do. We're doing extra things in the videos anyway. Now we're going to come back over here, and this will be so cool. I'm going to go to data validation, which is data validation, and then right there, or Alt DL. I'm going to hit Tab to get to allow, and down arrow. Down, down, down. When I get to list, I'm going to tab to accept it. I'm down in the source. I'm going to, but wait a second, I need to put my defined name here, and I forgot what I named it. No problem. There's a paste name dialog box, and the keyboard shortcut for it is F3. So F3 gives me my paste name dialog box, and there it is at the top. I'm going to double click DV. And there it is. I don't. You could put an error message if you want. I'm not going to. I'm just going to click OK. Oh, that is so cool. Now we have the ability to do data validation that's looking on some table on another sheet, which is often the case. If you're building, a customer data retrieval system or an invoice, your big table of data is probably going to be on a different sheet. So that's perfect that we can use define names to access that data. Now let's do this. Equals VLOOKUP. The lookup value is going to be this. Now when I copy it over, I'm going to have I want a lock going across the column. So I'm going to hit F4 key 3 times to lock the column reference. Comma, the table array. Oh man, I forgot. Oh yeah, I can use F3, and it was customer data V. That entire gigantic table. There it is. Now, comma. Now, I'm on this sheet, and I have no idea. I can't remember what first name, last name, balance, email, which column numbers there were. So I'm going to use the match function. Remember, the match is as if they invented it perfectly for column index inside of VLOOKUP. Now, this is where the screen tips come in handy, because it's kind of hard when you're doing functions inside of functions. But right now, we're in column index. As soon as I type an M, my dropdown comes because it's thinking I might want to use match or something like that. I'm going to double click this and watch what happens to the screen tip. Oh, that's beautiful. The match screen tip pops up. Now, the lookup value, one cell above, comma, the lookup array. Again, I forgot my name, so what's the keyboard shortcut? F3. Scroll down. I think it was it was field M. So I'm going to double click that. Comma. We're definitely doing exact match because we're looking at words, 0, close parentheses. Now, notice right there, it's match screen tip. But as soon as I close this off right here, it jumps back to VLOOKUP. And I don't know how many times when I'm building big formulas that helps, because I'm like, oh yeah, now I'm back to column index. Comma, and the lookup range, well, it's got to be, we're looking at an unsorted column over in that other table with account numbers. So I'm putting a 0 for false exact match. Close parentheses, Control Enter. And now I'm going to drag this over and immediately point to the smart tag. Now, there is a keyboard shortcut to open the smart tag. I think it's Alt-Shift-F10. Can you believe it? And then down arrow, down arrow, down arrow. Alt-Shift-F10. Now, that's the first really useless keyboard shortcut I've used in this book so far. And that's not in the book either. Alt-Shift-F10 to open a smart tag. And then I'm just going to use my mouse because I never use that one. I just clicked on Fill Without Formatting, and boom. Now we can just look up any customer, like we have an invoice in front of us, and we look up their account number, and boom. There's all of their first name, their last name, their email, and the balance that they owe. VLOOKUP and match. Now, we want to think about what we did here. VLOOKUP. We had to, in essence, look up two things. We already talked about the VLOOKUP. It's looking up that. But we also know that match is a lookup function that just returns the relative position of an item. So let's go look at our table and think about the fact that we did two different lookup functions. I'm going to scroll way up and pick the second one. I just want to make a point here. We're looking up L name and that. Let's go over here. So what do we have to do? We had to look down here first and figure out which row. 1, 2. So the second row, and then we had to get the data from here. Oh, but for that particular item, we needed to go 1, 2, 3. Last name, right? Is that? Yeah, last name was the one we picked for C3. So last name. So in essence, we found the row. And then we found the last name right here, which told us the third column. And then we found the intersecting value. If we go over to this new sheet, 2WL, that means two-way lookup. In essence, what we did is a two-way lookup. And so we had to find a row number and a column number. Now, 2 videos ahead, we will see a different function called index that specializes in doing two-way lookups. But conceptually, that's what we had to do. All right. In our next video, we will look at two really good uses for the match function. All right. See you next video.